Hello once again, and welcome to another edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. I'm joined by the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hursh, as well as the 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director, Ryan Young. I'm Doug Falconer, Agriculture Director at GX94 in Yorkton. And the first thing we wanted to talk about this week was bovine tuberculosis, a case of a cow from Saskatchewan that was being slaughtered in Alberta, and it was diagnosed with bovine TB. That was kind of the big news of the week, Kevin.
Yeah, it's important for the producers involved, and to the best of my knowledge, that herd hasn't been identified, but that herd will be tested. In previous cases, oftentimes you've seen a herd eradicated. It can spread further than that if the herd was, for instance, had some animals involved in a community pasture. Other producers may be drawn into this. Past experiences, it can take quite some time for the CFIA to fully get its arms around an outbreak like this. And although it isn't a case that's going to be likely very widespread, it certainly could cause significant pain to a number of individual producers.
I mean, I guess it shows that the system works. It was caught in the process of being taken or at a slaughter facility. So obviously the animal didn't enter the food system or anything like that.
No, that's quite true. The system works. And it was, if memory serves, there was a case the CFIA worked on just a few years ago. And again, this happened sort of behind closed doors and are not really public about it, but it's not the first case in recent times, that isolated case that they've had to get their controls around.
Now, when it comes to cattle prices, Ryan, I know you had a chance to speak with Emily Schmidt about cattle prices.
Yeah, they were kind of on the downward trend for this past week. Kind of a speed bump on an otherwise really good fall cattle run and a really good year for cattle prices as well. I remember seeing on the price chart from Canfax that most of the prices for most feeder steers and heifers were in the red for this past week, but that's largely due to the fact that we're just kind of at the seasonal lows for the amount of cattle that goes to market at auction. And at this point, we're towards the end of 2024 and into the Christmas season, so not really too much of a surprise there. But it also kind of segues into Kevin. You interviewed the executive director of Canfax, Brenna Grant, about 2024, and she had a few positive things to say.
Yes, certainly. Despite this last week's speed bump in prices, where we saw some downward trends in some weight ranges, overall the fall calf run saw ever continuing rise in feeder calf prices, and that's translated into very strong prices for bred cows and bred heifers, as many producers look to bolster their herds. When I asked Brenna Grant, does this mean that we're going to see an expansion in the beef cow herd in Saskatchewan after many years of contraction? She said it really depends on open heifers once we get into the spring grazing period, and whether those calves, feeder calves, heifers go out on grass, or whether they go to market, and that will largely depend upon weather conditions and forage supply. But certainly right now, very, very buoyant times price-wise in the cattle industry.
Also this week, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada released its principal field crop report, and Kevin, you took a delve into that.
I always compare their price projections with the previous month. They go through supply and demand and a number of factors, but I always think it's interesting where they think the average prices are going to end up. And they were actually positive with price increases in their projections month over month for the pulse crops, lentils, peas, and chickpeas. The one big decline was on canola, down $45 a ton from their November price forecast. And it's not really good timing, because Saskatchewan Crop Insurance sets its prices based on the Ag Canada December forecast. Manitoba is a little earlier. They may actually even use a somewhat earlier price forecast, because they come out with their crop insurance prices before Saskatchewan does. But based on their projection of dropping canola prices, if that's their price forecast, it probably doesn't bode very well for where the crop insurance price, insured price, will be under crop insurance programs.
Speaking of those prices, Ryan, you had a chance to speak with Adam Pacalo about canola and wheat prices this week.
Yeah, and pretty much what gains the January ICE futures canola contract and the March Minneapolis wheat contract had from last week was pretty much lost for this past week, or this week rather. Although the January contract I saw before the recording was up $10.60 to close at around 609.10 a metric ton. So that kind of brings the positive negative net gain or loss of about $5 in the negative. So still kind of a decline overall. And as for the March Minneapolis wheat contract, that was also down this week overall by around 8 cents a bushel. Closed today, I think, around 5.90 and a quarter of a cent. That's up 3/4 of a cent closing on Friday. So kind of at this point with the January canola contract, traders are going to focus on the March contract now. There really isn't a whole lot of contract volumes for January. So that's one factor. Another factor being the soybean market also being on a decline. So that dragged canola prices down as well. The Canadian dollar as well being below 70 cents. And that's the first time that that's happened since around 2002, back when I was in kindergarten, for a little bit of context. So it's been quite a long time since that's happened, but that's an external factor as well. And just with the overall instability of what's going on over in Ottawa with the Liberal Party, Chrystia Freeland resigning as finance minister and from cabinet over her disagreements with the direction of taking the country to where it needs to go in the future. I guess, in other words, the vision, I guess, disagreements on that between her and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So all of these factors kind of weigh in on both of the markets as we draw near the end of 2024.
The Saskatchewan government put out a news release this week that was said that for the period of January to October of this year, Saskatchewan exported $322 million worth of agri-food products to the United Arab Emirates in the Middle East. That was a 19% increase from the same period in 2023. And it's also saying that we exported $174 million in lentils alone to the UAE, which was a 31% increase over the same period last year as well. Is it good to see that we're diversifying who we sell our products to, Kevin, considering the geopolitical state of our globe right now?
And especially with lentils and peas, we normally think of China and India as our big markets for lentils and peas. So great news when you see an increase in sales to United Arab Emirates that can supplement all the other locations around the world where we send products.
Also, something else that came out this week was the herbicide carryover maps have been released.
Yeah, they've been out for a little while now, and they show basically your risk of herbicide carryover, whether it was a pre-seed treatment or a residual treatment or a in-season treatment, based on how much rainfall fell and how much those herbicides would have had the time to break down. But there certainly are herbicides that can leave a residue in the soil and affect subsequent crops, and it is a big problem from one year to the next if you're using some of those products that have residual properties. So good to look at what you used last year, look at the map for your risk, and then do the proper considerations for what you're planting in 2025 so that you don't end up with any crop injury.
Manitoba Agriculture released their insect pest report for the year, and it suggested that flea beetles were quite an issue in canola this year. I would imagine that might be the same situation here in Saskatchewan.
Actually, most of the work done suggests that flea beetles were less of a problem this year in Saskatchewan than in previous years. So shows some geographic differences from one location to another. So my understanding is that it wasn't a huge flea beetle year. There was some, you put the seed treatment on canola and mustard, and then whether or not you have to use follow-up sprays to control flea beetles. there wasn't as much spraying for flea beetles, as my understanding, as there was the previous year. So interesting that Manitoba had a different situation.
On the flip side, they said grasshoppers weren't much of an issue in Manitoba. I think that's kind of opposite for us.
We had some bad grasshopper problems, but the one good thing is the forecast map for the year ahead shows significantly reduced grasshopper populations. And I think it was the wet weather we had earlier in the year before the tap turned off kind of affected the grasshopper population. But when you looked around in the fall at how many adults there were and how many adults laying eggs, it was greatly reduced, and the survey shows that there could still be some hot spots depending on the weather in 2025, but the grasshopper problems we've seen the past 3 years in Saskatchewan, with a little bit of luck, it won't be as big of a problem in 2025.
And finally, we heard about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had his cabinet shuffle Friday morning, and Lawrence MacAulay is still Agriculture Minister. Your reaction to that, Ryan?
Doesn't sound all surprising considering that I could imagine there really isn't a whole lot of options on the Liberal side in terms of who has the qualifications for being Agriculture Minister, in terms of who has a farming background or an agribusiness background even. Not a whole lot other than Lawrence MacAulay. I mean, you could make an argument that, Marie-Claude Bibeau, she didn't have a farming background, but, she was willing to learn the nuances of agriculture, and she was doing that. You could see signs that, she was very committed to the role. So I guess there could be a case made for anybody else trying to take on that chair. But considering all the instability and chaos that's going on over in Ottawa, I'm pretty sure he was looking for stability in that case with keeping MacAulay as Ag Minister.
Your thoughts on that, Kevin?
Yeah, he probably just had other thoughts and other bigger issues to concern himself with. The budgetary statement that came out that resulted in the resignation of Chrystia Freeland, I think there was hardly, if any, mention of agriculture in that entire document. So I don't think it's very top of mind at the federal government at the moment. But we're a nation governmentally, federally in chaos at the moment.
All right. Well, with that, we will wrap up this week's edition of the SaskAgToday.com Roundtable. On behalf of the Chief Agricultural Editor for SaskAgToday.com, Kevin Hursh, and 620 CKRM Regina Agri-News Director, Ryan Young, I'm GX94 Yorkton Agriculture Director, Doug Falconer, saying so long until next time.